Hi guys, today we're going to take this picture, put a grid on it, and then paint it. I started with a small thumbnail sketch painting thing. It's really small. It's like 3.5 inches wide just to get some color swatches going. And then I transferred the grid onto a larger canvas. And then I roughed it out with just an acrylic wash. And then I started to fill in the cloud area. Now um, this process is actually super handy whenever you want to paint something that you're having trouble kind of roughing out the proportions, or you want to make really sure that you know that everything goes in the right place. So what happens is, like, I took this photo in Panama, and it was a photo of just a landscape that I saw, and I really, really loved the interaction of the sun and the clouds. So I really wanted to focus that. So the sun and the clouds ends up being in the top third of the composition, and I didn't want to lose that. So in my sketch, I have it outlined, even though in the photo the sun is not as apparent. So I will definitely focus on kind of exaggerating the contrast in the clouds here. And here I'm still filling out the skyline. And like when you're painting over an acrylic sketch like this, it's you don't want to lose all of your lines if there's some detail that you want to keep, right? So I am not painting over everything. I'm just painting kind of around some parts. Like if I were to approach this painting as a landscape painting without a grid, I would have just painted the entire top half white, like pale blue, kind of like a gradient for the sky first. But because I'm using a grid, I'm kind of hopping around the different sketched elements. And no two ways are right or wrong, you do either, whatever works. So in this case, I'm following the grid, so I'm going around things, which it might mean later on that I have to go back and kind of fill in some corners and whatnot. This is a still photo of what I had so far. So I wasn't using a tripod here, which made it kind of tricky because I don't have a tripod set up at my studio. I was at my studio when I did this. Obviously, this is a voiceover. I don't do these very often. Yeah, so I hope that it doesn't nauseate you having I'm actually just carrying my phone in one hand while painting with the other, so I felt a little silly. Anyway, um, so here I'm still filling in the clouds. And to get the same color of the clouds, I used my blue and a little touch of red and mostly white. And then to make it a little less saturated, I added a touch of yellow for the blue area, I believe. And you'd be surprised, like adding a touch of yellow to something, it's not, as long as it's a very small amount, it won't make it look yellowy. It just kind of reduces the saturation. Because if you guys remember, you have to add an opposite color um, to reduce the intensity of a color. So if you have something bright purple and you want to make it kind of grayed out, you add a tiny bit of yellow, a tiny bit of white, and that'll help make things get pushed in the background, especially when you're doing a landscape painting. So here I'm filling out the shadowy parts of the clouds, and I'm definitely trying to get the same colors mixed a few times over. And often, instead of remixing a brand new color, I'll like what I'm doing here is I'm using the same color that I used in the clouds, but I'm using it for the mountain range. And even if they are not like the exact color in the photo, it helps to have those common colors here and there in your painting. It really helps tie things together. It helps them look more cohesive. It helps it look like it's all one piece. So this is why I like to hop around the entire painting while I'm doing it instead of um, instead of completing one area in full detail before moving on to the next. And I think that's really important, especially with acrylics, because your paints don't stay wet and workable for very long. So you kind of have to like work with it while it's still fresh. And then you'll be able to use those same tones and block them in right at the start instead of worrying about the details. So very much here, I'm not worrying about details right away. All right, here I've jumped to where I started mixing white with yellow to start the sun. So I left everything filled except for this little sunspot. The reason I did that also is because there's a touch of blue in the clouds, and if I were to go ahead and add the yellow earlier, it would have turned the surrounding areas green. So when you're doing a sunset or a sky, it's important to keep your yellows and your blues very separate because they just turn green. Yellow and blue turn green, right? So if you have a pale yellow, it's good to do it either first or last. Just wait for things around it to kind of dry first. So this is a technique I've used a long time. I've been painting skies for a while, and I really love blocking in all the clouds first, and then I let it dry a little bit, and then I'll go in and do the lightest lights. That's my favorite part. So right here, I'm filling in the edges of the clouds, like making that yellow white lining to show how brightly the sun is shining behind those clouds, and I will exaggerate it in comparison to the photo. So in the photo, it's not as obvious, but I'm definitely pushing those colors to bring out that yellow. I even put in a little bit of orange in there too to contrast with the purple that was going on. And now, as you can see, I'm filling in the foreground elements, so the trees and the mountains that are in the foreground. So I started with the same blue and purplish reddish kind of colors before I mixed the green, because again, I want those same shades of purple in my trees. So I don't like mixing colors from scratch. I always kind of, this is another reason why I don't wash my brushes. You might notice that I just dive right into the next color right away. It's really rare that I wash my brushes, and this is because I kind of like to make sure that one color brings elements of the previous color to the next, unless it's a really stark contrast like the white yellow of the sun. I'm not going to jump from the green to mixing that. You know, I try to go in a gradient or in stages. So because the previous stage I had worked on were the mountains, the purplish mountains in the middle, the stage that followed was the green of the mountains. So I ended up using a bit of that blue purple to mix this dark green. And I'm pretty sure this dark green was just your typical blue, yellow, and a bunch of red to tone it down a bit. I have not used any black yet. I'm still just using pure tones here. So far it's primary cyan, I think. I'm not 100% sure. Let me check. I have the paint here with me. Just primary blue. They are Liquitex basic acrylics. This is a primary blue. I'm using primary red and primary yellow and white. So for this green, I just added a touch of red to make it a bit darker. And I think right around the very final, I'm not too sure if it's going to show up, but here I think at some point I added a bit of black. Yeah, I'm dipping into the black as a very, very last touch to get the trees that are in silhouette in the very foreground. I don't usually use black, and even here you can see I'm trying to mix in some of the green because just pure black on its own would have stuck out kind of like a sore thumb. So you like to, if you're going to use black, at least mix it in with some of the local colors so that it doesn't stick out too much and look weird. And I believe that is what I finished off with. And yeah, I hope you guys like it. And now you can see, you don't even see the grid at the end. So it's been completely covered. And I could have definitely gone in to more detail doing those clouds. But the essential idea was to get the colors right and to see those little mountains and the trees in the foreground. So trying to get better at letting myself just do some sketch paintings here and there. It's a great way to just let go and focus on things other than perfection and just have fun with the mixing process and just enjoying the paint in general. Thanks for joining me, you guys.